Welcome to everybody to our 70th webinar. This is Globe Observer Mission
So
Mosquito.
many.
70, we're 70. It's awesome. My name is Cassie Sofing, and I'm with the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. I'm one of your hosts today, and our other host is Dr. Rusty Lowe. I'll let you introduce yourself, Rusty.
Hey, hi, everyone. I'm Rusty Lowe. I work also with the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and my role is the scientist lead for the Mosquito Habitat Mapper. And I want to personally welcome you to our webinar today and also to introduce our guest speakers.
Yep.
Where are we? What have we done?
We have done an awful lot. This is just our data showcase from January 1st to Monday, March 17th. We have amazing amount of mosquito observations in this short period of time, which I'm thinking might happen because we have some really active participation down in Latin and Central America. We have a great and robust group in Africa, and then one in it must be Thailand. Is that right, Russ?
Yes, it is. Yeah, they are really active. And also, I see that we have a lot of activity in Madagascar, where we have, we're trying to find that invasive mosquito that a citizen scientist found a couple of years ago. We're trying to see if it's still there. That's the Anopheles stephensii, the really, really dangerous malaria mosquito.
Thank you. And for those of you who have joined us today, this is the third in a series of discussions and opportunities to take a look at open data and open science. And we've been led for the first two by Peter Nelson and Rusty Lowe. And now we've called in a big gun, Dr. Bree Lind, who can kind of add some additional resources to the discussions that have already been started. So let me introduce today, many of you already know Peter Nelson. He's from the Globe Trees and Land Cover campaign. But today we welcome him for his vast experience in the open science, open data world. And it'd be safe to say that Peter is one of the most enthusiastic presenters you'll have the opportunity to meet. He's an instructor at Oregon State University, the science lead for land cover in NASA's Globe Observer, and the Oregon View State Coordinator. He's an educator and an Earth system researcher using GIS and remote sensing satellites like Landsat and MODIS, and his mission is to help people see and understand the dynamic Earth from above. All right, and our next co-speaker is Dr. Brianna Lind. She's a savanna ecologist with interest in vegetation pattern formation, disturbance regimes, and coupled human natural systems. And I got that off of one of your former sites. She uses a combination of ecological theory, modeling, remote sensing, and field studies as a framework for approaching research questions. She earned a BA in geology and environmental science at Colby College in Maine, a Master of Science in Biology from South Dakota State University, which was associated with the Geospatial Sciences Center of Excellence, and she has a PhD from New Mexico State University, which I'm sure she'll explain in just a little bit. But currently, the reason that I've invited her here is her involvement with OpenScapes, and that's a NASA program that helps researchers access and analyze Earth science data in the cloud. So with that, I'm turning the whole conversation, and I'll stop sharing, over to Peter and Bree.
Well, thanks for that, Cassie. I'm really excited to continue this conversation about how we are making this transformation in science. And Dr. Lind here will definitely be able to give us some of the details about how you can do something that, really has been a challenge for most of us, which is accessing NASA data or satellite data. We always hear about how great it is and how wonderful it is, and we see pretty pictures, and we see all these smart people talking about this wonderful tool. But it's been really hard to actually access it. And that is one of those pieces that NASA and many different agencies and people in this field of remote sensing are trying to change. And so, again, I want to first highlight this transformation that is happening, and it's really many phases are kind of happening here. And so I want to direct you to this longer description kind of about this philosophy of open science at NASA. And yes, Dr. Lind is not at NASA per se, but one of the things is this philosophy is changing the way that we not only interact with each other through platforms like this and webinars of sharing our information, but also where we store that data and how we access it. So I want to really highlight this because by taking these actions, and this is what we've highlighted in the past with this open science badge, and the TOPS Open initiative. And so, this whole idea of transparent science, I think, is really crucial. And this is one of these pieces that has been hard to do in the past. There has been problems or challenges with having enough computer power or having the internet to be able to get that information, to be able to actually share information between researchers. And so one of the things that public science really is putting an emphasis on is repeatability and making it possible so everybody can actually do that research that we say all the time, right? The only way we can actually research what somebody else has done is being open about what we're doing, how we do it, and make it actually repeatable. And so I think it's really important to recognize why we are emphasizing this so much, right? And for me personally, I'm involved in really trying to take on this transformation and changing the way I do my science because I want more people involved. And I know that's something that Dr. Lind here, agrees with about. Science isn't just for people at a university anymore. It's something that if you have a computer, you have access and you can be part of this process of science, which I've learned through NASA citizen science activities like this. It's really about a conversation. That's what science is about. And if you can come with some information, whether it be your mosquito observations or some computer code or just some background about what's happening in a location, you are invited to be part of this conversation. And so, to me, that's one of these big aspects of what open science and our methods and what we're trying to do here in these many different webinars that we're going through. So I want to encourage you to continue on with getting your badge. And so I just want to see, or you can write into the chat. I'm kind of curious, how many people have at least started their open science journey towards getting their NASA badge? You can either raise your hand or you can drop in the chat that you've started it. But I'm kind of curious, out of the 19 or so that we have, how many people have started looking at this curriculum? All right. All right. I'm glad to see us 4 presenters here have been doing it. And wonderful. Yes. I'm so glad that you were able to go through and finish all of those badges. And yeah, Lisa, I totally understand. It took me a little while to make enough time to be able to go through this and actually be able to get through those modules. And in fact, I myself, I'm working on this open code one. Module 4 is where I'm at. And I think, one of the things to really think about is this idea of reusability. Sometimes it's, this idea of code. But I think that one of the things why we want to highlight some of the tools that we do is that there's ways of sharing this without having to be a computer coder, without having to be that software designer. And so, when we go through and kind of and hopefully highlight some of the ways that you go about this, just recognize that when we talk about code, the computer code sometimes can be written for us. You can be ones that you develop, but this is kind of the piece that makes things repeatable. And even recording what was the software version that you used, what was the hardware that you ran that on, all of those pieces, like has been highlighted in past Globe protocols is really important, right? Understanding all of those pieces allows somebody to repeat that. And so just recognize that, this open code piece is a place that can be sort of a barrier and intimidating, but hopefully, there's ways that we can get you around that if that is not the place that you want to spend your time in science. Okay. And so I want to encourage you to keep going through these modules, because we will be highlighting on these open results. Because I think, one of the things in science, it's fun to do all of that analysis all by yourself, sitting in your own house, staring at a computer like you see us doing. But really, it's that sharing of the results. And we just finished up, a lot of people submitting to the International Virtual Science Symposium. And so you might be considering those results. And how would you share those results of your methods or your data so that somebody can repeat your science, or somebody can learn from what you've done and not do that mistake again, or do it the way that you did it, right? And so this, again, is part of that sharing that previously were barriers to our science. And so, so please, continue taking this journey into open science with us, and we'll check back in with you and see how many of you will have completed your badge by our next session when we get together. Bree, I want to bring you into this conversation because you have a lot of experience, working with this method of open science, open data, open tools, open coding. And so, give us all a little perspective on what it's like to be, a younger scientist, like you were describing, somebody who went through and was getting their degree during, the last 5 years.
Yeah, you know what? I am technically a younger scientist, but when I really started first doing science, and I said, is there a right way to do some of this stuff when you're writing the code, and like what kind of procedures are there? It was really like a choose your own adventure thing. And so some of the things that I've learned, I am relearning now in a way that helps me a lot. Like, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I do a lot of work in the field, and when you collect data, it's very important. There's a lot of time and money related to that activity. And also, it's your science. So the data's on the computer, fine, great. And 2011, 2012, I don't even know if iPhones really existed yet. And like, if the computer breaks or has like a restart and things are unrecoverable. It's like it's a nightmare situation, really. Like, so one of the things that's really cool about open science is that there's like a lot of guardrails, almost like in bowling, to be like, hey, this is like a really cool thing that you could do to make your life way less stressful. And the sooner you start doing some of that stuff, the sooner you have less nightmares about like, what if my computer crashes? Like, what if my hard drive just breaks because it's too old and the disk can't keep spinning? Like, when you back up your data in a spot that's not your computer, like besides a hard drive, and you kind of start thinking about versioning some of your scripts and putting it on GitHub, and like using some of these newer open source tools that are becoming more available and having more information around them, it could really end up, it is a little bit of time to understand how to use them, but it can really be like a de-stressor, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, Bree, because if you're isolated by yourself, it can be very isolating, and having these backup systems, or being able to make a copy. I mean, this is one thing that I love about the Globe program, and using Globe Observer actually, is that once I upload that data to the Globe into that database, Lisa, who's on the call with us, sort of takes over, and she's now responsible for that. And almost everything I do, I'm making a copy of that data. And I have to tell people how I'm making a copy. Am I using all of that? Or am I filtering out? What am I sort of doing with the copy of that information? Right.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really appreciated about this program, because as a teacher, it allows me to not have to worry about paying for that or figuring out how to do it myself.
Yeah,
There's
and
smarter people who do it.
even yourself 2 weeks from now, like if you didn't write it down, like what did I do 2 weeks ago? I can't remember. I had to switch what I was working on, and you forgot. It's way easier to get back into projects when you take
Exactly.
notes for yourself, like for your future self.
Yeah, yeah. And I really appreciate that piece of things, because that is something that when we look back across all of the GLOBE protocols, we do see an evolution in the technology or the way that we do that measurement, and or even the results of why we got that measurement. Why are there no mosquitoes here today? There could be a lot of different reasons why that might have been happening. And when we start thinking about our data, not just for ourselves, but when we're actually putting it into databases like this and sharing it and actually having to think about how might somebody else understand this measurement, what I put up there. Those field notes are our friend. They actually help each other, share some of those information and some of that pieces. And so, so I really, for me, this is one of the great aspects of the GLOBE program is, they have provided teachers, researchers, students with that backup system already, and so, in many ways, they've been demonstrating to all of us this idea of open science, the open tools and resources. I think is one. I want to go through this with you, Bree, because there's a lot of different ways that people can access NASA data, right? And so, we want to highlight a little bit of how you can use some of these tools to get at some of that data. And so when we're talking about open tools, what do you think about with this, Bree? When somebody says open tools to you as a scientist, what comes to your mind?
I wonder what they did. Like, can I trust it? Because that's a scientist's skeptical, I gotta I want to know what they did so I could be
Yeah.
comfortable using it. But I do have some slides that I was
Yeah, perfect.
I could show you guys and kind of set up this one tool that I think is really great, helping connect the global data that NASA collects to more local activities around different groups of people collecting data with GLOBE and just researchers in general. Does that sound good?
Yeah, perfect. Take it, Bree.
Okay. And then just hop in whenever. Share my screen here. Okay. Well, so first I did want to touch on something about open science. I work very closely with NASA OpenScapes. And so this is a partnership between NASA and different organizations and almost the data libraries inside NASA, where we are kind of working together to help support each other around common data challenges and making new pathways or using existing pathways together and kind of going out from transitioning from a more lonely scientist where things are kind of hard and it's a little isolating to a space where everyone has something to contribute to and we can move towards our common goals together. And so it's a really fun way to bring everyone along and do science. It's very collaborative and exciting because it doesn't really matter what you bring to the table. Everyone can't know everything. So we all have different assets and things that we know to share with each other to get to stuff that's really awesome. So this is I think just a really fun perspective to think about bringing other people along, reusing resources, developing new resources as we need them, and kind of moving through the landscape of what's available together. And that's a lot of what open science is. And you couldn't do all of this togetherness without some level of transparency and kind of just communicating, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do that too. Now we can work together on it. If you don't communicate it, then no one would know you're working on the same thing. So yeah, I just wanted to start out with a little bit of a big picture concept here. You know, NASA does a lot of stuff. One of the things it does is look at Earth from space. And so I was thinking we could learn something new about remote sensing, maybe consider how you could use remote sensing like in your classrooms or in your spaces, and then kind of connect with this global data down to a more local scale that's really relevant to you. Okay, so bear with me. This is a little bit of a thought experiment, but one of the ways I like to think about remote sensing is kind of like a microscope. Like a satellite is kind of like a microscope in space pointing at Earth. Just like you can see new things in a whole different system when you look into a microscope and kind of see things that you've never seen before at a different scale and new patterns and kind of make connections. That's kind of the same thing that's happening with satellites looking at Earth. It's a totally different scale. It's just really far away. And we can see the whole picture, and that gives us a new perspective. And so, yeah, if we look in the microscope, okay, there's these like nuclei in the middle of these cells. This is kind of like a plant cell and it's died. And so by using different tools, we can detect certain things like the cell wall or, the nuclei, and kind of put our understanding of cell biology in relationship to different tools to highlight or see different components. And part of how this is done is by kind of playing with the tools available as part of the electromagnetic spectrum and kind of capitalizing on those tools to accentuate or kind of increase the contrast of different things. And so the same thing is really happening when you look at Earth from space. You can look in true color, or you could look in false color. Now, what happens when we look in false color? There's just an easier contrast. You can really see the difference between the built up environment and the oceans. And, you can pick out different pieces of things. So you get to be a detective and kind of use what you know. Oh, yeah, I know this is a built environment. Oh, yeah, there's a river there. And kind of apply that to the imagery to ask new questions with this new perspective. And so you can use, like in both instances, like with microscopes and satellites, we're kind of using our knowledge of a system to explore it better with new tools. And so I like to think of remote sensing as a tool that can amplify your science. And you can sense a lot of things from space, like nearly almost anything that happens on Earth. I'm going to run through a couple of examples here. This video is showing changes in land vegetation cover and snow cover on land, but then also ocean chlorophyll in the seas. And so you can see that these are basically annual dynamics. If you look over here, on the right-hand side, you can see it cycling through a year. And these are familiar patterns. We know that if you live in the north, you get snow in the winter and it's cooler. Some of the trees die back. You can see the contrast between north and south. There's a lot going on. You can also look at vegetation structure from space using a different type of remote sensing called LIDAR. And so that can give you an idea of tree canopy heights and what when you walk through a forest, what does that look like from space? Can we characterize the biomass of those trees with remote sensing processes? Yes, we can. You can also look at farmland from space. And there's lots of resources for kind of getting at different aspects of these things. Another cool thing, like, so these are just examples just to kind of like get your mind thinking. Resource use from space. If you leave your lights on at night, like a lamp in your road or whatever, that shows up, and there's satellites going over the earth taking imagery and capturing that light at night. And that light at night can be a really great proxy for all kinds of things like human population or infrastructure, or potentially coupling that with animal movements and different kinds of ideas. We can look at an individual phytoplankton in the ocean, or we can look at the entire ocean and how chlorophyll changes in the whole ocean for the last 30 years. So there's things that you can do at a small scale, and then everything in between, and then a really larger scale. And so one of the cool things about NASA data is that it's all over the world. So even it doesn't really matter where you are. There are lots of data sets that you could match up with your local environment to expand your understanding and contextualize information that you've already collected. Also, fire. Greenhouse gases is a new one, which is very exciting, looking at methane concentrations from space. Of course, precipitation, and seeing how much rainfall different areas of the world are getting. Evapotranspiration. So hopefully you're getting the idea that a lot of things happen on planet Earth. We know that. But also the satellites going around Earth capture a lot of these phenomena. So even though NASA has global data, it can have really local relevance. And so this is an image, this is a high resolution image of a baseball field in Minneapolis. But then this is the Landsat capture of this same baseball field. So no matter where you are, there's data that can be applied to your questions and your interests. And so I want to point out, like, satellites do a couple of things pretty well. Like, they're always going over the same spots all the time. And so none of the things, like, they don't forget. You know, sometimes clouds are in the way, but they're not like having an appointment and they forgot to do it. They're very consistent, and that's really helpful. And they're always there, and they keep recording data. So that's things that are really great about satellites. People, on the other hand, are really creative, and they're really good at being curious and thinking and making and using tools. So I like to think of satellite data as a tool that we can use that plays really well with pre-existing knowledge. So the satellite data that we have can kind of help you ask new questions or expand, get more data, or expand the spatial or temporal scale of data that you've already collected. It can help you characterize the space you're in a new way, and it can also help you ask questions and test hypotheses. So that sounds really cool. Hopefully you guys are in now. Like, please stop me if you have questions. But the question is now, like, how can I use this for my classroom? Well, there's this really cool thing called Appears, and I work with this team, and it's a tool that lets you take some of the most popular NASA data sets and extract area and point samples from them. And so there's all different types of variables at different scales in this tool. And one of the things that's really neat about it is that there's a lot of nuances associated with all of these different satellite data sets, and this obscures as many of those nuances as possible. So all you have to do is go in and say, I want to know about vegetation in this spot, and put the coordinate in and choose the variable, and you're good to go. It also lets you take multiple data sets at the same time, and also from different places. So this is a tool that has a ton of flexibility, and helps you keep track of your requests, which is really great for open science and reproducibility. I often go back and check like what version of this data did I use for this publication or stuff like that. And it even lets you explore it before you decide to download it. So this is like one of those ways. Appears is like one of those things that, yeah, NASA data can be challenging to access, but Appears makes this a much lighter lift than usual because it, like, once you know how to use the interface, it's just like really pleasant. So I was thinking we could go into a live demo, but I can stop for any questions if anything's come up in the chat or we want to talk about anything in more depth. Peter, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to highlight is, we've shown the Appears tool in a lot of different venues, including within RSET training, but where we have a data set of Globe Observer land cover data and coincident mosquito habitat data. And so, one of the things that I think is really important here is there's a lot of ways of coming up with where to look. And one of the things that we want to leave here with, I think, Bree, is I think some suggestions on what spatial data sets or what data sets should people start off with and what should they actually be considering? Because I know for me, oh my gosh, like I could do anything, right? And so, that's both good, but it's also really overwhelming, right? And so let's walk through actually a little bit of just doing like a point sample or just starting to think about at a location. How do I characterize it?
So I was looking at your guys' website and I pulled down a huge amount of data by accident. And this is data. Let me pull up. I think it's a little bit it's more organized in this one. From Clay High School, had a lot of information on over time, from 2016 all the way through 2023, actually. This group had information on green up from Globe that was collected. And so they've been putting that in. And I figured, oh, well, let's just pull up some vegetation information around Clay High School. So I took these two coordinates here, and this is from the Globe website. So if you take the latitude and longitude of your site, you can go into Appears, and first you have to sign in, and that requires an Earth Data login. If you don't have one, I don't think I'm automatically signed in on this browser, so I'll show you. It's very easy and fast to make one. So mine is going to look like this. But if I didn't have one, you could just click this register button and it takes like a minute and you'll get an email. Okay, great. So now I'm logged in. But I think I'm automatically logged in on this browser. So I'll just do that. Click this sign in button quick.
And this is, I just want to like pause right here because I think, when we talk about open science, logins and, things like that can feel like barriers, right?
Yeah, they can.
And that's not the intention behind this. There's obviously safety and some concern that NASA has about not being used for malicious purposes. But I just kind of want to highlight, this is a larger conversation about barriers to science and whether something like this is a problem. So please, let us know if you have issues or problems with what you're planning on doing, accessing this, because that is something that we just want to be aware of as we develop tools or think about what is presented, because sometimes these things are great, but then a student can't access it, right? Because of those barriers. So, definitely let us know, not only us, but Rusty and Cassie, if there are any issues like that, and maybe there's ways around that we can help you with. So I just wanted to highlight that piece of, the idea of open science. But wait, I've got to log in here, Bree, and I don't have to pay. So there's at least, that piece. It lowers the barrier there. But it is something to consider and might be an issue with certain people. So I know there's good reasons for it, but I really like that, to
Yeah,
sort of
that's a
highlight.
really good point to emphasize. I guess especially in the student realm, like maybe there could be a shared email for the group, or I'm not exactly
Yeah.
sure how that would work, but one of the things that's nice, once you do log in, it will send you this platform appears, sends you updates to your email to let you know that your request has been received and that it's when it's been processed. So you don't have to like keep coming back and checking it. Like you can just go do something else entirely and wait for your request to process. So let's start with a point request. So I'll go to extract and click on point. And I'm going to choose a new request. I have already done a couple of requests this morning that I'll show you guys later. And if we wanted to, we could hop into those right from here. Sometimes when people have had done requests before, they can also share a request file, but we don't need to worry about that right now. So we'll just start with a new request. I mentioned we had copied our latitude and longitude from, and I overwrote that. We had copied our latitude and longitude from here. So let's just do that again really fast. And first thing we'll do, well, it doesn't really matter, but I'll just paste this before I forget about it. Okay, so now that that's there, turns out that Clay High School is in, I think it's in Michigan. We can zoom in, but it shows you where the point is. Oh, it's very close. Oh, it looks like it's in Ohio, close to Michigan. Okay, so
one of our Star Globe schools.
Yeah.
Everybody will recognize that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I had also mentioned, we have data from 2016 all the way to 2023. So, and this is on like the vegetation green up stuff. So I was thinking maybe we'd like to go back a little bit further. Let's say like 2003 to maybe 2023. So we'll just put that into the dates. And then, so we have our sample name. I might have actually already used this, so I'm going to do A because I'm really great at version control. Okay, and so then this is where it gets exciting. Select the layers to include in your sample. We want something about vegetation. So let's type that in. And so you'll see that as we type vegetation in, we get all kinds of data sets coming up. And we may or may not know much about these data sets. If we look at this bottom one here, it looks like it's from something called VEERS. There's an index. This is happening. If you look at it a little bit more closely, you can see it's at 1,000 meters. And it happens on a monthly basis. And it goes all the way from 2012 to now. But we don't want 2012. We want it to go all the way back to 2003. So this isn't really a great choice for us. And the other thing is the high school is just like one spot. So I would prefer to have like a much smaller spatial resolution for this data that we're looking at. So maybe something like this, which says vegetation index. So normalized vegetation index and EVI are just both ways to look at how green Earth looks from space. How green is it? Is it really green? Like, is everything alive and thriving and just being super green? Or is stuff dead and like looks more yellow than green? Let's try that. And so we can put in, like, let's look at the EVI every 16 days from 2003 to 2023 at this school. And we'll also just take some quality information here so we know what we're looking at. And then you press submit. So this little green flag comes up and says, we got your request. And this is telling me I have new emails. Oh, which is not exactly yet from a peers, but in a minute, I will get an email from a peer saying you just put a request in. Did it come? Hold on. Let's see. Oh, shoot. I have to give more time next time. Yeah. But it happens automatically. And so we'll do a little bit of TV magic here. I've already put in this request earlier this morning. It's not going to take a long time.
Yeah. And Bree, I want to pause right there because, you know, as a teacher, I actually really like this pause, this moment of reflection where you can talk about what they did. Everybody comes together. And in fact, you can maybe even pivot to another lesson. You can sort of wrap it up for the day. And so, you know, I really like this piece as a way of sort of ending things, or as, you know, sort of a way of making everybody, you know, sort of come together like this. And so as an instructor, you know, I really appreciate, you know, the fact that you do actually have to pause here. You don't get instant results. Which I also think is a reflection of, with a satellite, you don't get instant results. There is this thing called lag time. So in essence, we're sort of replicating that right here, that a measurement's been made and you have to sometimes wait for it to get packaged and delivered to you like this.
Yes, you do. I think this email must have come. Here it is now. It says, hey, look, thanks for putting this request in. You can monitor the request from this link. It gives you your information about what you requested. And we could see now, in Explore, we could see this request is 32% complete and progressing. In the meantime, let's click on this one that I did this morning at the same location. And we can see there's a lot of data here. So from 2004 to 2003, we have every 16 days for this one spot in the world. And so if we wanted to just start off by saying, well, they started collecting data in 2016, like, sure, let's just go from 2016 to today. And so you can see now what you're seeing on here is, you have to look at this, you know, this number here, 2016, 2023. You can see the pattern of how the amount of greenness changes throughout the year. Let's narrow this even a little bit further and say, well, let's just say most recently. Okay, so now we can look at the different months and say, wow, it looks like greenness gets up pretty high in September, maybe. Well, we can, what's the date? 8/29. So that's the end of August. And then it's a really similar time, but not the exact same date for the next year. So there's things that you can look at, and you could kind of go back and see, well, let's scroll down to 2023. And you can think about the data that you collected in 2023 and say, oh, like, were we observing things like kind of at the same time of the satellites, or did we observe like the peak greenness a little bit sooner than the satellite got it? Is that because it only revisits the same spot every 16 days, or what exactly is going on? So you can kind of relate the information you've collected to actual data collected from the satellite, but you can also contextualize it. Like, this is what happened in 2023. Is that normal? Like, what is normally going on? It looks like greenness got much higher in 2022. Oh, maybe not much higher, but, you know, it got up a little bit higher than everyone else. What was going on there? And you can look at it in a different way as well. These are actually clickable. So if you don't, this is showing all of the years right now. When you hover over it, I guess there's a couple of ones in blue, but you can select and deselect these to kind of focus in on a certain year. Let's choose like we did before, we'll choose 2023. So maybe you don't want to see all this data, but sometimes it's kind of nice to just see how like what you observed in a year or 2 years relates to the overall trends. Yeah, so now we can see 2023, and it does look like the greenness peaks in the summer, in July or August. And that could be something that you can kind of like feel out with your students. Like, did you see that on the ground? Like, or are different spots or different types of plants going faster or slower than the collective visualization of that area at that scale? Another thing I wanted to show you quickly was, it turns out there's a couple of places named Clay High School in the United States. So I went ahead and I'll just bring this up. I went into Google Earth, this guy, which is also free. And I typed in Clay High School. I got 5 results. I just took the first 3, and they were in Indiana, Ohio, and Florida. So I took their locations and put them in a spreadsheet. And I'll show you exactly what I did. I just copied it here and went back to appears, started a new request, just so you can see what it looks like. So right here, you can actually, let's go back for a second. We want to copy a previous request. Actually, we're pretty happy with that request that I've already done. So let's copy it. And that means that our data is already loaded, which is great. We do want that data again, but we want it at more locations. And so category, latitude, and longitude, all we have to do from copying it from Excel is just put a comma in between here. And then we're good to go. And we'll be able to submit the request. And you can also see these points coming up down below. So we can check, oh, it's in Indiana, Florida, or whatever, many clays. You can choose whatever name you like. Okay, then we can see the timestamp is already set too. So it's really easy just to click the button and say submit. That was delivered. And because of TV Magic, we will go to Explore and click schools named Clay, which I did this morning. And now we can see like, okay, this is what the vegetation looked like in Indiana for all of this time. That was the one we looked at originally. Ohio looks slightly different. You can dive into the data and think about why there's certain regional differences just from this perspective. And then Florida is a totally different deal too. So you can see the axes changing. You can start thinking about the data, and then you can also, download these data sets and kind of play with them in some more open source tools like R or Python, and either recreate these graphics or make new ones and ask different questions and kind of expand your scope. So we were just looking at that one point, but we can put that point in the context of time. We can put that point in the context of other locations that we're familiar with or might want to visit, or other places that have also collected similar data. So it's kind of an exciting way to start exploring and visualizing what's available. And you also have the inherent ability to kind of only show the highest quality data, since every time you work with peers, you get that quality information with your data set request. Yeah, so it can be a really fun exercise just to start thinking about things from a new perspective.
Yeah. Thanks, Bree. That really takes us into what we're hoping people will do. That environmental number around whether it be the greenness, like Dr. Lowe has talked about. That how green an area is a variable or that is used in a lot of mosquito models, and I think that's one of those pieces that is really helpful about the having all of these data sets in one location is it really forces us to think about what is important for this particular species. When is it important for this particular species, right? And so, I love this phenology example because that is one of those pieces where scientists are trying to predict when we might have an emergence of mosquitoes. And is it related to that green up event? Since I've been so enlightened now about one of those key characteristics of mosquito habitat, right? So for me as an instructor, one of the things that I really have students do initially is go through and explore all of those geospatial layers that are there. Get familiar with the names of them, how they were collected, what are the units, right? Bree, I think that to me is one of those really important pieces that I have to go back and do is look at what are these numbers? What do they mean? What is the range of values? And what should I be expecting? And this whole idea of like, is it the highest? Well, as you saw, the scales on those things change. And so it really is important for me as a researcher, but also to have my students go in and really read and understand all of those data sets that are available before they just start clicking away and getting numbers back and then trying to make sense out of what those numbers mean. Well, what are the units? And I know for me, things that get reported in metric. And that throws some of my students off. Like, you were just talking about meters, right? Yeah. And also things like, temperature is one that we'll get in Celsius, right? So for me, I'm just really excited that, this tool is really powerful and can be overwhelming. But that's part of this open science piece of things is, clearly you can walk anybody through any problems that they might have. So, I hope that people will see this as an invitation to come in and ask us those questions about what the heck does this mean? Because as I said at the beginning, that's really what science is about, is coming to us with some data or with something and say, hey, what does this mean? And can you give me some insights into this? And some of those patterns will only make sense when you're in that local environment. So for me, I'm really excited to have learned about this new tool like this. I know I'm going to have to spend some time getting deeper in there. And Rusty, I think, this is a great place for you to kind of help guide us a little bit in terms of like, well, what is important to the mosquitoes and where are we finding them and what might we want to sort of, consider out of all of these different possibilities like this. So I'm excited for us to consider how we can keep learning together.
I think so. And this week, I was just talking to a mosquito modeler who is, developing predictive models based on this remote sensing data for his research that he's doing in Guyana right now. So I think we'll have some great opportunities to show how's this science being done, and also the ways in which you can replicate this kind of work using your own personal data. I just wanted to say quickly, because we're almost at the end of the hour, but I just wanted to say this has been a really nice sort of like three webinar series where we sort of talked about what is this open data thing that NASA and all these international organizations are now promoting? How can we learn about it? And then today we looked about, and here's some of that open data that is now available. And one of the things that NASA has done is, unlike many organizations, we have had open data for a very long time. And so, but it's not always that easy to get at. And this tool that Bree showed us today, Dr. Lynn showed us today, was, one of the most accessible tools that will allow you to connect your place with this very complicated data. And it was much, much harder before we had this Appears tool. So are there any questions before we get going? I'm sure Bree and are happy to say that. Go ahead, Cassie.
Well, I know we have some questions and we'll try to get to them from the chat, but I just have a couple of wrap-up slides, but Bree, is there a place that teachers can find how to cite the appears data source then?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Oh, absolutely. So, yes, let me just do a quick.
Threw a curveball there. I know. This whole idea of citing not only your data, but the software that you're using is a really important piece. So thanks for bringing that up, Cassie, because that's how we make it repeatable. And
So
so go, Bree.
we'll just, hop on to the LPDAAC website and I'll show you two things. The first is this is like the landing page for the tool, and you can launch appears from here, and you can also click this
Beautiful.
citation button to get the citation. Another thing that's really great about these websites is we can look at, like, we were looking at NDVI before. And so we could search the data catalog. Let me just put in MODIS. Sometimes it is very helpful to know the names.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be the exact same one, but the point is, when you're thinking about using the data more seriously, there's tools to help you on these product landing pages to get to know what variables are available, just like Peter was saying, like what units they're in, and even more documentation about how, like, the user guide is very user friendly to, like, just read about what the data is. And then when you're getting super serious, you can jump into the algorithm theoretical basis document and get all of the information you could ever want about applying these data sets. So this is a nice tool that not everyone is aware of, to kind of get a quick review of what, the specs of the different types of data sets and learn what they are. Like, because there's a lot of acronyms in here. So it's easy to kind of go to this page and get yourself oriented fairly quickly.
Well, I know as the student research projects get more complicated and complex, that the reviewers are going to be looking at their data sources. So just knowing and a reminder to cite is it's just a good idea. But excellent presentation. We've got a lot of positive comments. People are excited about it. And I thank you very much for you and Peter for your time.
I think the Peter and Bree show is about as exciting as things get around here. It's really fun. I always tell Peter it's always fun to see the Peter show, but Peter and Bree show is pretty fun too.
It is definitely add in other people who are doing what we're trying to do. I mean, this is a big community. So I'm glad that we have had the opportunity to bring in not only new tools, but new people, and to really keep expanding this out. And so I'm excited about what we've been shown today, and look forward to sharing some of my requests with the larger community here.
Mm-hmm. And
Cassie?
I'm excited to see Cassie, what she's going to be sharing right now, because this is something we have been hoping to get for quite a while on the Globe Observer.
Take it away, Rusty.
No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I have the next slide. No, you go ahead.
Hey, so one of the things that we have now is an ability for our citizen scientists to obtain validation of the work that they've done, the importance of the work they're doing through NASA, by obtaining badges, that may or may not be interesting for you, but especially for younger folks, these badges are great. People are using them on LinkedIn as a way to document what they are doing as they progress, through early careers. And we now have these badges. So they will automatically kick in. Once you make so many observations, you will receive a notification that you are a badge owner. Anything else that we should say, Peter or Cassie, about that?
I would just add, if you're an educator, it's a great way to keep track of your student progress. Ask them to show you what they've made, what they've done.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Actually, this ties right into the phenology piece. But as an instructor, it really is that piece where if we want to watch green up, we need to have a consistent observation. So this is a great way to see that. I know for me, my longest streak so far is 24 days. So I hope to hear what other people's streaks are, and come join me in the double digits and see if you can.
I just wanted to say, when I was in Egypt, I actually did I think it was like 28 days, Peter. 'Cause
Yes, way to
every
go,
day-
Rusty.
Every day I did an observation, but it was before they started tracking, so I'm not going to
Right.
get a badge for it.
And this is kind of, you know, back to this idea of, you know, we're trying to mimic and be like these satellites. And so, you know, Bree did a great job of highlighting why continuous observations like this are encouraged. And we're just trying to find ways to encourage these not only repeat observations, but, you know, individual observations that you can do. And you know, we're keeping track of that. Yeah, so this is definitely a new way that, you know, took up some space on my phone. And so please report any bugs that might have happened as a result of this update. I know I've had some quirkiness with my app as a result, but that's a way that you can help us actually improve this too. Report anything that might be strange and weird happening now.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump to the next slide, and kind of from March 15th, so just last week, to April 15th, helping to promote our colleagues in the Globe Clouds group, but they're doing the NASA Globe Clouds Spring Cloud Observation Data Challenge. And in 2018, volunteers submitted more than 55,600 cloud observations. And we're hoping the 2024 Globe Eclipse Challenge builds the long-term record of cloud observations to help scientists study change over time. So please, while you're out taking land cover and mosquito observations, look up and see what's going on and take an observation also. And then just a reminder that we have our webinar and recordings are at this particular URL. So if you go to globe.gov and Mission Mosquito, you'll find all of our recorded webinars, as well as a link to all of our resources, which are supporting all of our mosquito and land cover work. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Great. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bree. Thanks, Peter and Rusty. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.